So we're finally getting to identify elder brother dependent arising in the third line of the stanza above, in the mirror of the elder brother dependent arising, which there it looks as if elder brother is the same as the father. The father dependent arising, the elder brother dependent arising. But in the Tibetan of the commentary, it gives the readers a few choices. So let's take a look at it in this lovely poem. So, Mama Emptiness, the non-affirming negative. So we've had a lot of preparation. Affirming negatives and non-affirming negatives. I had an email exchange with Don Lopez, and he alerted me to a poem by Mipam Gyatso. I was going to dig out his dates since we did some reading of Mipam Gyatso, mainly 20th century, right? Am I right? Early 20th century. But correct me if I'm wrong. A couple of people nodded. He was asked by, well, I shouldn't say by, he was asked, that's the way to get around not remembering who asked him, to write a poem much like Jangkya's poem. So that shows you the fame of Jangkya's poem in Tibet. Let's see, I was going to look up, not that it isn't right in this book, Jangkya's dates. Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po was the closest student of Jangkya dor-je. But now if you have the dates in front of you, I think Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po was only 10 years younger than Jangkya dor-je, than his teacher. And undoubtedly, it meant a lot, it means a lot, that Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po was Jangkya's closest student. But we can wonder how much time Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po spent in close proximity to his Lama. His Lama spent a lot of time in Beijing. Oh, speaking of which, in the very first sentence of, which is, I think, the only new sentence in that biography that I'm going to try and include in this book, I repeated a few words, which is totally unintentional, but it could have been a joke based on the repetition of words that Jangkya repeats in his poem. But it could have been an intentional thing, an intentional trope which is a word I don't use, but is a word used nowadays as a joke based on Jangkya's, repeating words like existing, existing, and so forth in the poem later on in this poem. But I wanted to reflect the language of his poem, even though I would think people would wonder as they come upon it if there's been a printing error or a typographical error. And I guess I should put in a note at the first occurrence, warning the reader that I'm just echoing Jangkya's technique. And I'm finding that as a commentator, along with Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po on Jangkya's text, why did he use these repetitions? What's the force of them? And I'm beginning to accept that task. With each repetition, why did it? What is the force of the repetition? The first one is a little bit difficult. I'm finding it a bit difficult to posit. And I broke out into laughter. There's one phrase way later on in the poem that I think Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po had a hard time positing the meaning of. And he uses an escape. An escape means, that made me burst into laughter the other day. To get away without giving any commentary, while he gives a mealy-mouth commentary. So I hope I won't end up not having any commentary and having to use a mealy-mouth commentary, like here he repeats a word. Anyway. So, well, of course, here's the first one right here. Yes. Maybe I'll be forced into the mealy-mouth commentary. I guess this is the one.
Donald Lopez?
Yes, Donald Lopez. Thank you. And there's a translation done by Brunholz, if that's how you pronounce his name, in his book. Well, I guess nobody's seen that. And he calls it a commentary on Jangkya's Song of the View. Well, I read it. I downloaded the Tibetan. I didn't download his translation. And indeed, there's a commentary on, Straight from the Heart. I looked up, Brunholz calls it a commentary on Jangkya's text. No, sorry. I read the Tibetan, and it's a response. You could call it a response. Why? He wrote a poem, much like Jangkya's, from the great completeness point of view, and he uses some of Jangkya's techniques, such as repetitions, and I'll give a mealy-mouthed commentary, and so forth. But it's really fun. Well, it'd be fun for us to see how he echoes Jang-kya's literary techniques in laying out, constructing a similar type of experiential commentary from the great completeness point of view. And I was thinking how nice it would be if I spent 6 months or a year translating it, but I won't do that. I'll continue on with what I'm doing in working on Swatantrika. I can't afford the 6 months or a year. But it's teasing my mind in the background, since I pretend to know something about the great completeness by way of Mipam's writings. In other words, I cannot say, what do you say? I read it, I read the words, and I was teased into wanting, occasionally I'd pick up a little meaning and wanted to know the meaning of the rest. And also how he played with Jang-kya's techniques. But the fact that he did do this, a short poem somewhat like Jang-kya's, well, not just somewhat like Jang-kya's, tells us how famous Jang-kya's poem is. Another thing I want to say is that Elvin Jones, who was Geshe Soba's main student and lived with, they got to know each other in the monastery, Geshe Wangyal's so-called monastery in New Jersey, where I lived for 5 years, and Elvin bought a house down the road and then moved in a little while later, maybe 6 months after I moved in, but Elvin was there before I was there. Elvin used to complain about Tibetans' use of imagery, a metaphor, simile, etc., and the lack of nuance, maybe one could say the brutal use of imagery. Nothing compared to other areas, shall we say other areas of the world. He was probably referring to the so-called West, Western literature. Nothing as brilliant as in Western literature. Elvin was steeped in Greek and Roman, I guess, literature. I don't know if he knew any Latin or Greek. But he was Geshe Soba's prime student and prime benefactor. And we have Geshe Soba's center in Wisconsin. We have Elvin to thank for that huge enterprise. Elvin went to sleep one night and didn't come to breakfast the next morning. And when they opened his door, he was sleeping in the lion posture, good Buddhist posture, dead. or his body was dead. Elvin wasn't dead. His consciousness had gone on. Elvin and I had, to speak of brutality, shall we say, vibrant arguments. And when I gave up arguing with him out in the front yard of the monastery, Elvin said, and I said something like, "I'm not going to do this anymore," and slowly walked away. And the expansive front yard, expansive in that neighborhood, he said, "What am I going to do?" Which I didn't answer. My silence was his answer. It meant, "I'm not going to feed your need anymore," meaning I felt I didn't have the need anymore. But I certainly did have the need for the vibrant, violent, explosive arguments. Geshe Wangyal was an irascible, in terms of argument, one could say vibrant, violent, loud, screaming, which then encouraged his students to be like that until they saw the uselessness of it and, unlike him, gave it up. Okay. Yeah. So, the non-affirming negative, a mere negative, a mere absence that doesn't affirm anything in its place except other non-affirming negatives. And then we've been dealing with how the realization of emptiness does stimulate realization of dependent arising, which is like eating your cake today, but still having that very same piece of cake to eat tomorrow, which is what having your cake and eating it too means. In other words, it doesn't affirm anything in place of the negated object of negation. But a whole lot of stuff is going on. Mere elimination of inherent existence is not exactly the same as the basis of that emptiness. Mama isn't exactly the same as Papa. One isolate, exactly the same as the basis of the emptiness. The basis of the emptiness is not to be confused with the emptiness, but it does not have another nature apart from that base. Now, we've been seeing how emptiness is or how phenomena are the manifestations of emptiness. You know? Buddhism makes such a distinction of itself from Samkhya, but the vocabulary of Sankhya is used to indicate the relationship between emptiness and the phenomena. Sport. Also the word sport. But appears as if existing. Now, does this mean existing means you don't find, you search in the 7 ways for this phenomenon that you thought existed so strongly, so concretely, and you didn't find anything. But then subsequently it appears as if existing. You know, there is something in an ultimately. Now, what does this ultimately mean? Finally, when you're not just concentrating on the absence, in an ultimately uncatchable, unapprehendable, I'm shouting, aren't I? Unapprehendable is glossing uncatchable way. It's unapprehendable in these 7 ways. Or you're finding that it's unapprehendable. Meaning realizing. Wow. In the mirror of inference. Depending upon the elder brother reason of dependent arising. So the metaphor elder brother stands for the reason of dependent arising. In other words, not just dependent arising, but dependent arising being used as the reason. So instead of 7 reasons, you're just using dependent arising. So instead of, we've got these dependent arisings all around us, but now you're using any of these dependent arisings. We got to get in the advertisement. I've got it. Oh yeah, here we go. We get both cameras. I get double pay when I get. All right, this is coffee. I don't want coffee. I got 3 cups. This is green drink. Wow. I wish I knew the brand. I could collect from them. So you see, when reading the Tibetan, mirror the elder brother could, when reading not the stanza, but Kön-chog-jig-me-wang-po, you could read the elder brother as being the mirror, or it could be inference. But the most sensible one, I think, is reason of dependent arising. So you're using, and what follows this also, it makes sense that the elder brother is reason of dependent arising. And an elder sibling is somebody that you look to for help, a helper. So this makes sense. Depending upon the helper, the reason, when you learn how to use a reason to generate inference, you need some help.
What is the mirror?
So the mirror shows you something, That's enough, shows. So in the next line, it says Jangkya is assuming a humble position when he says, now that line up in the stanza, the likes of crazy me. Well, now we know he's not crazy me. It's us. He's putting us in the stanza. The likes of crazy Jeffrey has not engaged in investigation and analysis. The likes of crazy Tarba has not engaged in investigation and analysis. Put your name in there. You see, this is his technique. You see, when he says that, he's very smart. The likes of crazy, your name, has not engaged in investigation and analysis. So when you put that in there, that means I've got to take dependent arising as the reason and think, oh, the subject, cup I like so much, right? Because it's bigger. And when I look for this, when I want a lot of fluid, it has a certain purpose. Cup I like so much does not inherently exist. And I cherish it because it has a certain function. Does not inherently exist because of being a dependent arising, or the 7 reasons which meet back to dependent arising. So that means we have to study these 7 reasonings. And Chandrakīrti says they meet back to dependent arising. We have to engage in, otherwise we'll be crazy. Merely using things for their superficial function, not using them, not seeing them as means of arriving back at Mama emptiness, which is the basis of manifestation. All of these things are manifesting out of Mama's lap. Mama's lap is this vast expanse from which these phenomena are appearing. So, Jangkya then, in the next stanza, tells us, it's stunning what he tells us we have to do. I hope, meaning you should hope, to get to the point where you can lay aside the he tells you his story. How did I get to the point where I am? Where I'm capable of having done so much analysis. So he said, I've done a whole lot of searching from afar. The testaments, the wills, in a sense, bestowed on the winds by Nāgārjuna and Chandrakīrti. He chooses out two. By means of Tsongkhapa, Mañjushrīgarbha. It's not Mañjushrīgarbha, it's Mañjushrīgarbha. Jumbel. So, how did he get at what Nāgārjuna and Chandrakīrti are saying? In other words, it's by way of Tsongkhapa that he was able to get at what Nāgārjuna and Chandrakīrti are saying. Geshe Wangyal said this to three of us sitting on the thin carpet under it, on top of his oak floor, in pain, for hour after hour after hour, to see this aged Mama abiding within, this primordial Mama abiding within. Within oneself, myself. So he got to the point in his study where he could lay aside these texts. Some people, the Zen masters were often such that after a great deal of study, they could, burn the books, throw them in the river, or, commit the ultimate hara, or just plain lay them aside. And this is what lay them aside means. It doesn't mean they bought them one day and then later on in the day or the next day lay them aside. The 6 collections of reasonings. Shall I try to name them? They're in the, shall I just say they're in the bibliography at the end of the book. The treatise on the middle way called Wisdom. There's a neat order to them. But Jang-kya puts them in a particular order. But I don't have that in memory. There's 60 stanzas of reasonings. I'll take it out of order, the Precious Garland. The 70 stanzas. That's what, 3 or 4? The finely woven, 5. What's the 6th? What did I forget?
Spelling disputes.
Ah, yes. Yeah. You said it. What is my word? Dispelling disputes. Overcoming objections. That's overcoming is, I don't think, my word. Objections is my word. Dispelling objections. And he chooses 2 of Chandrakīrti's, how many? He doesn't include Chandrakīrti, he says and so forth, yeah. Which in the and so forth would be Chandrakīrti's commentary on Aryadeva's 400. And like testaments, wills, all of these, bestowed on the winds, sent to us on the winds, the translations. And the foremost holy Mañjushrīgarbha. Tsongkhapa's great commentary, Nāgārjuna's fundamental truths in the wisdom, middle, called wisdom. Great commentary in Chandrakīrti Supplement, Nāgārjuna's in the middle, and the essence of eloquence. He chooses out 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Is there any that we're shocked to see isn't there? These are 3 huge ones. To see this good face of aged Mama, emptiness, dwelling within his own continuum. Now he says, I hope, again assuming a low posture. So he's saying this is what you should hope to do upon having studied, to the point of having them clear in the mind and meditated upon them. Now, in the next stanza, isn't he issuing some warnings to not get tripped up by some of this terminology such that you're we've talked about this before, searching for something beyond what's appearing to you, sort of like something on an animal that sticks out from their body, horn-like. You know, some animals have horns, we call them horns. On some there would be antlers, right? That sticks out from the body. So you've got the basic appearance of things, and then you're looking for something extra beyond the regular appearance of things. A horn-like thing beyond the regular appearance. Now, of course, with that animal, those horns are part of the regular appearance of that animal. That would be the mistake. That would be mistaking, not taking the example the right way. Something beyond the regular appearance. And in fact, if the horns fell off, the animal would still be there, I guess. You know, if you want to get complex about this. But all this means is something sticking out above the regular part of the animal's body. So, if that's what you're looking for the object of negation, you've made a huge mistake. Because the object to be negated is appearing mixed with these appearances. I may treasure, I'll get another hit, another, what do you call it? Royalty. It's mixed right with the appearance of this. That's why it's so hard to identify. It's mixed right with this. And why, when we negate the object of negation, we think it doesn't exist. We think the object doesn't exist. And why it's so easy to fall to an extreme of nihilism. Why? Because the object of negation appears right along with the appearance of the object. It's not easy. And why Nāgārjuna says it's when you get into this, you feel like it's like trying to ride a wild horse. You get thrown off. And why His Holiness said, when he was in, it's got to be 1972, when His Holiness, after teaching the middle-length exposition of the stages of the path, gathered together the scholars, and for whatever odd reason I was included in the private office building, in the not the bigger room but the smaller room, and we were packed in, and still there were some people who fell asleep during His Holiness's I don't know how many, but I feel sorry for, the people, some not getting a good night's sleep. There weren't many, there'd be a couple who would nod off. And His Holiness said, when you make some progress, His Holiness said, you'll feel, if this isn't true, nothing's true. In other words, you've been brought to nihilism. If this doesn't exist, nothing exists. You see? You've gotten to the point where the object of negation is the thing itself. And so you feel, if this is not true, nothing's true. So you've been brought to the level of, and he said it with, he was mimicking the frustration. And he said, that's when you're making progress. And, and he wasn't giving you anything. He just, it's like you're getting somewhere, but he didn't give you, how to get out of that. You've been thrown off the horse. There wasn't any consolation except to say, briefly, very briefly, in his rough way. So you see, this really important terminology, if you don't, in the third line, whereby leaving these, you can see the value, concrete appearances as they are. They seem to be searching for something horn-like above and beyond these concrete appearances to negate. He's giving a screaming, criticism of, people who have read the text and gotten the wrong, have not known where to put the emphasis. They don't talk up that these conspicuous, concrete appearances exist, in the face of aged mama, free of obstruction. They don't say that. They don't say this. But although they're explanations on top of explanations, not getting at the crucial impact, are manifold. They have so many explanations. I have the qualm that aged mama has fled and gone off, has escaped somewhere else. They don't even have a whiff, a taste of aged mama in their explanations. Wow, he's really giving it to them. Now he has a word in the next stanza between the two existings. Can I escape? No, I can't escape. I don't know as I can handle this next stanza without more preparation. Maybe I should skip to the meaning and leave this for the next time. Maybe I will go to the explanation. I'll leave that stanza for next time. Nowadays, some of our Gedemba. Gedemba means endowed with virtue, which came to mean Gelupa in those having the system of virtue. But Gedemba is still used. It's not just old-fashioned. Bright-minded proponents of reasoning. And indeed, he's not, I don't think that's just cynical. due to adhering too strongly, too powerfully, in dependence upon the apparent explanation of textbooks. You know, there is the terminology, you know, just what we were talking about. And then you've got to examine this terminology. What he's saying is, and see that it's identifying how things appear to us now. We need to know this terminology, but it's not something extra beyond, you know, like some horn-like thing. I should come to this talk with a set of horns. Actually, I've got a set of horns, or something that from I don't know how I got it, from the stadium I used to live almost next to. So at the time of identifying the object of negation, here's what they say: it is not necessary to negate the concrete in accordance with what appears to us now. Wow! Leaving it as it is, they seem to be creating the wearisome task of searching for something other than that to negate. Now, like having horns hanging out is, I ought to translate that, something like having horns, something other than that, like having horns, move that earlier, right? I was looking at that today and saying, well, their word order isn't very good. Something other than that, like having horns, if you move that over there, to negate. Is that helpful? So I think we've and then I don't think the next sentence, I felt when I read it earlier this morning, they do not talk up that in the face of, or for the mode of apprehension of, the wisdom. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, they don't mention very much that for the mode of apprehension, or that for the wisdom directly realizing emptiness, it needs these concrete, these conspicuous, concrete, it should say do not exist. Tadenoa dor ling 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 di yurbe ke mindukla. Do not exist. Wouldn't that be awful? Do not exist, right? Do not exist in the way of they appear to us. So I left out do not. Isn't that awful? I sent this while I was trying to do up a final version. Was there's a Geshe-ma from Tsenilabtra who's translating for a Lama, and she wanted this and asked the private office asked Jeremy, who accompanies the Dalai Lama in the private office, if she could get a copy of my former translation, which has a lot of garbage in it, I must admit. And I wanted to get this together to send it to her. And I've found that there's, as in this sentence, a bit of lacking. Do not exist in the way they appear to us nowadays. They don't mention very often. They don't mention much that in the face of realizing emptiness, these concrete appearances don't exist. And that has to be mentioned a lot. These 5 types of dualistic appearances don't exist in the face of realizing emptiness. Even that, never mind, I would add, never mind these conspicuous, concrete appearances don't exist in the face of, some people say, even in the face of conceptual realization of emptiness. Okay, that's enough. And then in the next paragraph, in the second line, of a person who has complete analysis of the view. Person is absent. Okay. Jang-kya is a tough guy, and we're going to come on a section where he explains what's wrong with all the other non-Tsongkhapa interpreters. He's not saying within Gelug, he's saying outside of Gelug. He's strong on Tsongkhapa. It's very nice to see. It's very nice to see a very straightforward expositor. His Holiness gave a very strong presentation at Ganden. In, what was it, November, December? We don't have to become mushy, although I like to, he likes also to see things from the point of view of the other great Tibetan proponents. He does both. Okay. You can see how excited I am.